Welcome back, my unapologetic friends. We are back for another episode of the Unapologetic Anthropologist, and we are moving right along with some of the evolution and story pieces of humanity. Our last episode was really the dawn of humanity, and now, this episode, we are going to talk about the Great Migration out of Africa, one of history's greatest human journeys. So let's just jump in and get started. Alrighty, as the theme of our debunking myths continues this podcast season, I do want to debunk the fact that people tend to think that not every current Homo sapien has migrated out of Africa, and I want to state that that is false. Every person alive today can trace their ancestry back to this migration out of Africa. That is a myth. If somebody does not believe that, if they say, I am a true Neanderthal, that is not true. Every single human alive or in modern history can trace their ancestry back to this migration. Africa is really the cradle of humankind. So if you ever want to do a little bit of research on that specifically, I implore you to do so. And of course, let me know what you find in the chat or in the discussions below. Now, a lot of our early case studies can be found here. We do see the famous Lucy discovery out of here as well. And then the next step of Homo habilis and the early Homo erectus with the Turcan boy. So some cool case studies there if you're interested in doing some additional research outside of this platform here. I definitely recommend doing so, but I just wanted to start by saying yes, all of us are a product of this specific event in history. Let's keep going. So I have to say, this piece of humanity, this accomplishment really fascinates me. The first travelers to push into the unknown. Can you imagine not knowing that the rest of the world was out there? The continents, the oceans, the coastline, the nature that you're going to see, including maybe some new potential predators to be alert. This is really a magnitude of accomplishment as far as humanity is concerned. So we see the departure. Homo erectus, if you watch my last video, they were indeed the cousins to do it. They left Africa roughly 1.8 million years ago. Imagine how different the landscape, the world, imagine how scary that must have been. Some of the motivation to do this really is profound curiosity. You know, humans like to travel and dive into the unknown, whether that's science, in this case, it's the geography of the rest of the world. But we also see some shifting climates. We'll talk about that more in an upcoming episode. And then, of course, the chasing of food sources, natural resources, some things like that. The legacy here is by crossing this boundary, it sets the stage for our entire species to evolve and expand. It's such an accomplishment. We really have to applaud our Homo erectus cousins for leading the charge so that the rest of life could happen. Now, a small disclosure with this slide here. If you watched my last episode, you know that the rise of Homo sapiens and this cognitive explosion is debated, whether that was gradual or sudden. So I do apologize. We don't know. So don't take my slide for sure, but just want to point that out. We do see at least a cognitive evolution from Homo erectus to now the rise of Homo sapiens. We see a sudden shift in symbolic thought, complex language. We see the modern humans ourselves emerging around 300,000 years ago. Now, mind you, we left Africa 1.8 million years ago, so it still took a lot of time to get to this 300,000 years ago point on our timeline. The advantage here, and I want to point some things out in these boxes on the bottom here, is we are, from what we can tell, a highly social and cooperative species. That does differ from some of our primate cousins and relations, as we talked about in our last episode. So, where you see to the right that we survived not by being the strongest, but we didn't really survive by being the smartest either. When you talk about survival of fitness, we have to really be sure of what fitness means. It's not just that we were big and bad and more capable than others, but really we are sharing with each other. We're communicating ideas, thoughts, what works, what doesn't work. And this whole notion of having a cooperative, shared knowledge is really, to me, what makes us special and what makes us the the greatest survivor of all, is this ability to share what's working, what doesn't, and really be collaborative amongst our species. So, does that make us the smartest? I'm not sure. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm really curious on this specific piece here. But let's just keep moving along. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the timeline of this happening. So, I really want to put into perspective the scope and scale of this migration. So, obviously, you see the leaving of Africa, going into, of course, Europe and Siberia, moving over to the Middle East and Asia, down through Australia, some of those islands, what's now considered New Zealand, and then, of course, over to the Americas. So, I know in an earlier episode that we talked about the discovery of America being highly debated, but I just want to give you the overall flow that's shown here. And keep in mind, a small population of humans undertook this extremely dangerous journey in human history. We really must commend them. Now, I talked about this in our last episode quite a bit, but I want to mention it again here. Of course, we were not alone during this point in time. You have the Neanderthals, you have Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, the Denisovans. There's a bunch of cousins here at play. So, human evolution is not just a single branching tree or a straight line, you have a mixture here. The Neanderthals, of course, in Europe, and the Denisovans over in Asia, the legacy is that the genetic evidence proves extensive interbreeding, which kind of goes back to that collaboration and that social networking I talked about on the last slide, how we are innately social, which includes breeding as well. Their ancient DNA, therefore, lives on in our modern genomes today. We'll talk a little bit more about genetics and genomes later on, but just wanted to point this out that it's kind of a melting pot versus a linear straight evolution. Let's keep going. So, after millions of years of living in the same continent, the same geographical region, we now have some adaptations. Our bodies change to these new world certain environmental things. So let's look at this matrix below. We have different environmental changes. The sun, our diet has now changed. We're in a different area. We have to learn how to grow new food. That includes altitude, more mountainous terrains the further north you go. And then, of course, Siberia. We know how cold that gets as well. The challenge that presents is the UV radiation levels in our body, and our biological adaptation to that is different skin pigmentations. So the concept of race is completely socially structured. We have a biological reasoning for different pigmentation in the skin that has nothing to do with some of the more racist stem origins there. Looking back at our diet, we have some challenges as far as new agricultural challenges and sourcing food. And we see a lot of different tolerances developed. Lactose intolerance, we see some alcohol intolerance over in the East as well. Definitely do some research on food evolution. I'm looking to take that class in my education at Harvard, so I would love some input on that prior to taking the class. And then, of course, think about our mountainous terrains. We now have some altitude changes, some thin air, and that's going to highly impact our lungs and the circulation of our blood as well. So, lots of different biological changes now that we're moving into new environments, and how that can also change our evolution in general to bring us to where we're at today. So at this point, you may be asking, how in the world could we possibly even know this, and why is any of this even important today? Well, we know this because of the evidence. We have fossils, we have physical bones from our ancestors, such as Lucy. We have tools, arts, settlements, different burial sites, different archaeological data that was left behind. We, of course, have now entered into this wonderful world of learning about our genomes and genetics and reading some of the ancient DNA and how that's worked its way up into the modern human population. And then climate science, if you're a millennial like me, you've been hearing this all your life, but reconstructing ancient environments that actually forced us to move, ice ages, droughts, things like that, and how that could possibly change coming up in our lifetime. Now, I know this was probably the quickest overview of human evolution and our migration out of Africa, but I want to keep our episodes nice, short, and sweet so that we can really think about these topics from a new perspective, do some additional research, and make sure we're having plenty of friendly conversation and discussion on our platform. But migration really is the central story of humanity. It's one of the sweet spots for me in my heart because a lot of the other things that we study, like our social constructs, agriculture, city states, a lot of the different things are going to come out of this timeline in history. Human diversity reflects adaptation, but it's all kind of beautiful to think that we share one common origin. We all started at the same spot. It's a beautiful perspective to have. And I really want to open up this episode for a lot of discussion because there's a lot of question about what will be the next human great migration. A lot of people think it may be space, specifically Mars. There's a lot of scientists who say, no, we need to take care of the home that we've had and that we've had an impact on. So I'd love to know your thoughts and perspective on what will the next human migration be. And in the meantime, make sure you share, subscribe, like it, make sure you're talking about all these wonderful things with your friends, and keep in touch with me for our next episode. In the meantime, stay unapologetic, and I will see you next time.